The topic that everybody seems to talk about the most right now is realignment. When you look at the landscape right now, is there any moment where you kind of step back and you're like, what is going on? We got Stanford and Cal in the ACC. We got 4 West Coast schools in the Big Ten, even Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC next year, right? That was obviously the headline news a few years ago. Is it jarring to look at the landscape with realignment and kind of think about what we have ahead of us in the next few years?
Well, I guess a couple of ways to answer that question. When you speak to groups, I'm not sure it's the number one question, but you can count on expansion and realignment being a question. And so you think about it in terms of the SEC. And from our perspective, since I've been at the conference, we've expanded twice in 2012 and then most recently here with Oklahoma and Texas, who are set to join July 1, 2024. But one other time, Commissioner Kramer expanded in the early 90s when we added Arkansas and South Carolina. And the expansions were very different. In 1990, early 90s, Commissioner Kramer knew that the conference expanded from then 10 teams to 12 teams and split into 2 divisions, that by rule, we could host a conference championship game. And so the expansion at that point was different in the fact that the conference was pursuing two members that would be good fits for the SEC. Fast forward to 2012 and the expansion around Texas A&M and Missouri, that was very different. At that point, we weren't looking to expand. Mike Slive got a call from Texas A&M, leaving the Big 12. He'd like to come to the Southeastern Conference. And so we went through a tedious process of looking at sponsored sports, looking at GPAs, looking at all kind of comparative analysis to see if they'd be a good fit. And ultimately, our presidents and chancellors felt like they would, and they have been. And so we were planning, we had schedules, and we were moving full speed ahead as a 13-team conference, and going to have a 7-team Western Division and a 6-team Eastern Division. And I know, well, as you know, from working with us now on scheduling, that's challenging. And then it was shortly thereafter, Missouri followed and reached out, and they were also interested. And we went through the same exercise and ultimately felt like Missouri would be a good fit for the SEC as well. And very similar with Oklahoma and Texas, except they reached out together and said, we're leaving the Big 12. We'd like to come together to the SEC. And ultimately, that was a great ad for the SEC, or I think will prove to be a great ad. So very different expansions through the year. Now, you ask nationally, yeah, I mean, we focus on the SEC, and we're proud of the contiguous manner in which our schools lay out. I'll use the analogy of Oklahoma and working with Joe Castiglione and their team. They're going to be great. Same with Chris Del Conte in Texas. But, there are people in Arkansas and Oklahoma that are cousins, and they're going to talk at Thanksgiving about the season and the game. And so our footprint being contiguous, I think, is still very important and makes college athletics special. So others may have done some things different. That's for them to decide, but it's definitely different than it was when I first started in 2000.